Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shasta Roberts, and we are on week 3 of me reading my book, Stronger Than Your Excuses to You. So today we are starting on the list of excuses, and chapter is excuse number 1. Others can do it, so can I. I grew up in a household with both my parents, and 30 years later, they are still together today. My parents dated for 2 weeks before they were engaged and married 6 months later. In the first couple years of their marriage, they moved to 2 different states while my dad was in the Army. Then they settled in Washington State. I am the second of 4 kids. I have an older sister, a younger brother, and a younger sister. Although my parents have been together my entire life, throughout my childhood, I never knew what true love really looked like on a day-to-day basis. I grew up wondering, why were my parents still together if they hated each other? Although I grew up with my parents not getting along most of the time, I could not say I had a bad childhood. I had bad things happen, but in the whole, I had a good childhood. We weren't poor, but we were on the low end of the middle class. Low enough to qualify for the free school lunch program. School clothes shopping was not a thing in our house. We just didn't have a whole lot of money to go out and get new things. My parents did a good job of not letting that affect our lives. We had what we needed. They would give up what they had so us kids could have more. We never went hungry or in need of any actual life essentials. I grew up in the same house for almost all my life. My parents bought the house when I was in first grade and did not move out of that house till I was grown and married with 3 kids. It was a small 900 square foot 3-bedroom home. It was a little tight, but we managed. We were a close family, so it made it easy when with 4 kids, we had to share 2 small 9-by-9 rooms. My siblings and I would fight as normal children do, but we loved each other. We still do. I knew that you stuck with family no matter what happens, no matter what life threw at you. Family was everything. That was before I knew anything about losing a loved one. The first death I had to ever witness and be a part of was my little sister's. I was 13 and a selfish teenager. When my parents took my sister to the hospital for a stomach ache, she did not look like she was sick. She wasn't bleeding or crying. She was fine, I thought, a mild tummy ache. Throughout the next week, I never understood why my parents were not at home. Why were my grandparents helping take care of me? I can remember one of the days. I was upset at my mom on the phone because no one would be able to take me to the movies with my friends. My sister is fine. Come back home and let's get back to life where you are here for all of us instead of gone. I wasn't old enough, mature enough, or any enough ready for what was not being told to me. What would accompany next would not only shock me, but change my life forever. Just a few days later, after not knowing where my parents had been, let alone did I really care about where my sister was, my grandparents took me down to the Children's Hospital in Seattle. My mind could not wrap around anything that was happening. People had never left my life before. I had never even had a grandparent be sick. The only time I can recall before then was my great-grandma passed in her sleep, just like you're supposed to when you're older. When you're young, you get sick. you get better, and life goes on. At least that is what 13-year-old me thought. 2 days later, we were back for a second visit. I talked with her the first day, but she seemed pretty sleepy. Probably just trying to get healed to come home. I mean, when I'm sick, I get tired and want to sleep a lot too. However, this time, I was escorted to a waiting room where I sat surrounded by my family. Family from out of town had flown in or drove a half a day west to be with us. I didn't get what was going on. I saw her in the hospital yesterday, and none of these people were here with us yesterday. I had only seen my grandpa come out west one other time. Why would he come all the way here now? Death only comes to old people or from major accidents. This was neither of those. I watched her walk out of our house with my mom not even a week prior. I did not know then I would never see her walk back in. Sitting in the waiting room, I remember just tearing a paper to shreds. I'm not sure where the paper came from and wasn't sure what to do. Was I supposed to be sad? Was I supposed to cry? As I looked around, I noticed all my favorite people were here visiting me. This is glorious. This is a glorious time. Let's laugh and have fun. No one was laughing though. No one was having fun. Everyone was somber, and I guess that is what I'm supposed to be then too. There I sat, waiting to be told what was going on and what is going to happen next. I'm not sure if I didn't understand what was going on or didn't want to understand what was going on. Either way, I didn't know how to react. So I just followed suit of all the other adults. After what seemed like a long time, I was taken back to a small room with a table. I sat around it with my immediate family, my parents, my brother, and my older sister. The doctor came in to talk to us. I'm not sure why he needed to talk to me. I'm just the sister, and we're going to take my sister home, right? I did not fully comprehend what was being said. I learned she does not look the same as she did when I saw her just a day prior. This is where I found out she would not be coming home today or any day. This was when I found out our family of 6 would become a family of 5. It just hadn't happened yet. She was still with us, but barely. We were still a family of 5 right now. They must be wrong because she is still alive. My mind was racing. How do I act? What do I say? Is this even real? We had been ushered back to the small room for one reason and one reason only. The doctors wanted to walk us through what would happen as my sister was taken off life support. She had gone to the doctor's office for a stomach ache, and she was having a hard time walking since she was in so much pain. At the doctor's, she was sent to the local hospital, but then she was quickly rushed down to the children's hospital an hour away. She needed surgery because it wasn't just a stomach ache, but an appendicitis. An appendicitis is a condition where your appendix lining becomes blocked. The function of an appendix is not completely known, and right now there are just theories of its function. What is known is it stores bacteria. When the appendix becomes inflamed, the bacteria multiply rapidly. If the appendix ruptures, it spreads the bacteria throughout your body like an infection. Her appendix was inflamed and needed to be removed. By the time she went into surgery, her appendix had burst and spilled those toxins into her body. Over several days, each organ had started to shut down from being poisoned. No matter what the doctors tried to do to save her, the toxins had poisoned her blood and shut down her organs. She had been put on life support, but could now no longer live on life support. It was keeping her alive right then, but she would never be able to be taken off it and come back to us. My parents wanted us as a family to be with her as she passed. After what would proceed was explained to us, we were then asked if we had any questions for the doctors. Did we need to ask anything before we saw her? I'm not sure what I was supposed to ask. All I could think about was, when is she coming home so we could be a family again and my life could stop being disrupted? After all this, I still hadn't grasped what was about to happen. The last experience I had walking into the same hospital was to visit my newborn baby brother. This very same children's hospital is where we visited him and saw him for the first time days after he was born. He was born prematurely and was evacuated to the closest children's hospital. Time seems so relative now. I was 4 then, and it seemed like it was 2 days and he was at home with us. That wasn't the case, but he did come home to us after not long in the NICU. This time is the same, right? She's going to come home to us as well. She just needed time to heal. I was a little older when my sister was in the hospital than when my brother was, but we were at this very same hospital. We were at a place for healing. Not only that, they only heal children here. We are in a children's only hospital, a place where sick children come and then the hospital makes them better. I can only attribute my naiveness to the fact that I had never known a young person could die. I had never had someone close to me die. I can tell you this was the last time I thought of a hospital as a place of healing. After the meeting, my parents led my older sister, my brother, and myself into the ICU hospital room. My sister was hooked up to a plethora of machines, some to make her breathe since she was sedated. Some were taking out her bad blood, cleaning it, and then injecting it back into her. Her body was filled with poisons and every organ was shutting down. She had been injected with so many drugs over the course of less than a handful of days to help her heal, but her body was rejecting them all. This gave her boils the size of quarters all over her body. Every single expenditure was bloated, even her face. You could hardly recognize her. Her body was rejecting everything the hospital and doctors tried, and it was time to let her go in peace. As I sat on a chair close to her head, a minister said a prayer and the machines were turned off. In under a minute, her heart stopped beating as she was gone. After that point, all I can remember was walking out of the room and leaving the hospital. It was late at night and we lived an hour away, but I somehow ended up in my bed. When I woke up, the world was a new world. I had slept in from being up so late. By the time I woke up, the house was already full of people. It was a weekday and I had not missed school yet through this whole situation, but today I did not attend, nor would I for almost a week. The next week seemed like a blur. More people kept coming to town. The house was never empty, always filled. It was different, but at the same time, the same. It was supposed to be a sad time, but I wasn't sure how to process my feelings, and at the same time, I was also happy to see everyone. Everyone came from all over the country. People who had never visited us. People who were distant relatives or my parents' past friends who I had never met. What I remember most is my grandparents brought their RV and parked it at our house so there was more space. Us kids hung out in it to get away from the crowded house. As the day of the funeral drew near, I'm not sure anyone could have been ready for what was about to ensue. My mind has blocked out most of the day because it was so traumatic, but there are a few moments I still remember. I wish I could say that my mind blocked out all the bad parts of the experience, but the worst of it all is what I remember most. There are two main moments of the funeral day I distinctly remember. These two moments changed me from that day on. The funeral was not an open casket, but there was a visual the day before where you could go see her. I remember walking into the funeral home surrounded by my family. I remember my mom's words as clear as day when she saw my sister. "My baby, what did they do to her?" She turned right around to my aunt and cried for her to fix her. My aunt is a board-certified hairstylist and esthetician. Thankfully, she had makeup and hair products with her since she was doing several of our hair for the funeral. She grabbed them from the car and got to work. A funeral visual or wake is a time when a close family comes to the funeral home to view the body before the funeral and after the body has been prepared. This gives each person a time they can say goodbye or maybe stay for a while to pray. The body is dressed in clothes chosen by the family, and a mortuary cosmetologist brightens them up with a little makeup. The goal is to make the deceased look more like they did when they were alive. This is solely for the benefit of the grieving. We have an easier time processing the death and saying goodbye if they appear as we wish to remember them. My sister was 2 months shy of her 8th birthday when she died. She had never worn makeup except for once during Halloween. It was never something she was interested in, even as a little girl. We never grew up playing dress up with our mother's makeup and lipstick, so no one was ready for the shock to see my sister full of red lipstick and bright rouge blush. The funeral home made her look like a 25-year-old instead of a 7-year-old. This memory is not about the makeup on my sister, though. This memory was the first time I ever saw my mom break down and cry. My mother is not the type to cry. I can count only a handful of times I've seen my mom cry, and even at that, I would have to really think about it. After she saw my sister and she turned around to my aunt, she broke down and cried. This moment was small but significant. Things were going to be different from here on out. I slightly remember the funeral at the church, but nothing jumps out at me. Everyone was there to take care of me and my siblings while my parents were indisposed, as they should have been. What I do remember is after the funeral at the church, we went to the cemetery to bless her before she was put into the ground. I have never forgotten the crystal clear image of that grave burial. It was getting closer and closer to the end of October. It did not rain that day, but it had been raining several days that week. There was a green canopy covering an area above the grave. Seats were set up for immediate family members to sit. Prayers were said, and she was lowered to the ground. At this point, this is where everyone leaves, and there is a reception. I scarcely remember talking to my parents even once that day. My siblings and I were ushered around by family members. My parents could not be our parents. They lost one of their children, and that day they were burying her forever. My grandparents drove me and my siblings from the grave site to the reception. My parents were not ready to leave yet. As I was being ushered away, I once again was struck by my mom's voice. She kept saying, not my little girl. She's not supposed to go before me. This is not supposed to happen. As we drove away, I turned around to see my parents still sitting on those green folding chairs crying together. This moment right here is it. This is the make or break point in a marriage. The death of a child is traumatic and can cause long-term effects on a married couple. Depending on the situation, one parent could assign some blame to another. Or opposite, they could blame themselves for not being attentive enough. No matter the death, when it is a child, it is almost guaranteed the parents will experience depression, health problems, memory impairment, and psychological problems. This is the stage in a marriage where everything is trying to break you. The world seems against not only you personally, but you as a couple. With the ensuing negativity that comes with the effects of bereavement, it is only natural to want to pull away from the world. If you can grieve a child together and not fall apart, then anyone should be able to get through their insignificant marriage problems. My parents did not let the death of my sister break them. Even after this hard time, they still stuck through it together. It's not like their marriage was amazing before. I still thought they didn't love each other. Maybe I have had it wrong the whole time, though. Maybe they do love each other and show it in a very different way. They didn't grow apart, blaming each other or drifting away during a spout of depression. They easily could have said the death of their child was the start of their separation, and everyone would have understood. It would have been okay for them not to make heads or tails and just call it quits before they couldn't go. It would have been easy and no one would have blamed them for their decision. That is not what happened, though. They held together and are still together. This right here is what marriage is about. Holding on strong and steady for each other through hard times. Leaning into each other for support instead of blaming. The one time the easy road was right out in front of them, they decided to take the hard road together. If they can get through this most difficult time in their lives and still be together, so can I. They should have gotten divorced after this horrific experience, but they didn't. They have gone through more than I ever have as a parent, and they haven't gotten divorced. I must not have it that hard then. If they can stay married through that, then I should be able to get through anything too. If they can do it, then I can do it. All right, that is the end of that chapter, and I will see you guys again next week for my excuse number 2.